Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have been tagged by the delightful Kim at middle of the book march to do the nature book tag. I will put a link to Kim's version of this tag in the description box below, as well as that of its originators. They are Tasmin from the Wild Island Farm and Anya from Well Traveled Books. Now, if you've never gone to Kim's channel, it's a marvelous place to stop in and hear discussion about books. If you have an interest in books, you should go to her channel. I highly doubt that anybody would come to my channel and not have already heard about and visited Kim's channel. So you would expect the nature tag to focus on nature. It consists of 10 prompts, and just the way my answers to the prompts have devolved, nature is only sort of at the backdrop. Everything else besides nature may well be in here. So if you're thinking that I'm going to be talking about the birds and the bees, that will not be this. I should not do this too much because I know it bothers some people. Let me try to make myself a little bit more staid and sedate. So there is a tradition in BookTube at times where you are permitted to twist the parameters of a tag to suit your own purposes. You can interpret a question in a different way just so that you have an answer to make. And so I will be doing some of that here. It actually is a tag which got me to thinking about a lot of things. And I fear that I'm on the verge of some kind of a synthesis about something here, but it has not arrived yet, and I don't expect it during the course of this video. So there are 10 prompts here, and I have pulled a slew of books to talk about, none of which I expect to go into in any great detail, but there are some passages that I wish to read aloud to you, and so that may extend the video time, the viewing time. Pardon me a second. I invite you to grab your libation of choice and feel free to imbibe. I know this is frowned upon by some booktubers. So the first prompt is, what is your favorite book that has a heavy focus on nature? Well, that would be The Tale of Genji. You cannot read Genji without being aware of nature all over the place. Actually, any of that Heian literature. I thought I would just read a little excerpt from this, stumbled upon almost at random. In the beginning of the 3rd month, I went to a secluded part of the western hills where not a soul was to be seen and where everything was peacefully shrouded in mist. There was nothing but the mass of flowers that blossomed desolately on the hillside, and I wrote this poem. Here they grow in mountain depths, far from any dwelling place, and no one comes to view their blooms. So the Heian literature of the time is replete with stories of pilgrimages. Journeying was a bit hard. I believe this author has a big movement in the course of the story. It's a very short book, and traveling was not easy. Certainly not as easy as it has become. So I would list Genji as my favorite, but I thought I should talk to you a little bit about this one, A Sea of Storms. It's a book. Well, let me read you the opening paragraph to it, if I can find it, where the author Stuart Schwartz explains the genesis of this work of history. In the summer of 1986, I took my dog-eared copy of Fernand Braudel's The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World off the shelf and began to reread it. I should interrupt and say that I've tried to find a copy of that reasonably priced, and I have not been able to do so. During much of the period from the mid-1960s to the mid-1980s, I had been researching and writing a book about the history of sugar plantations and slavery in Brazil. A very good book, incidentally. I read that before I read this. During that time, I had read extensively in some of the wonderful and innovative books published in that period about slavery, race relations, plantation systems, and colonial societies, not only in Brazil and Spanish America, but in North America and the Caribbean as well. As I finished my book on Brazilian sugar, I began to consider beginning a new project on the Caribbean, but I wanted to branch out and to explore some dimension other than slavery that might provide a unifying theme for my studies. The Caribbean seemed broadly analogous to the Mediterranean, and so I turned to Braudel's book, An Old Friend, for inspiration. This great book is filled with provocative ideas, some that have withstood the test of time better than others, but its focus, a little she probably wants him to move because she wants his spot. That's what she likes to do. The great book is filled with provocative ideas, some that have withstood the test of time better than others, but its focus on the sea itself, its islands and surrounding mainlands, peninsulas, mountain ranges, and the coasts that gave the Mediterranean its shape, had been at its time an exciting way to reconceptualize the history of a region. By downplaying political change and by disregarding the division of that sea into Christian and Muslim spheres or into histories confined by national or cultural boundaries, Braudel had sought the elements that had defined the region as a whole and that had often resulted in shared behaviors, beliefs, and actions transcending national, religious, and other cultural divisions. As I read on through that summer, it was clear that geography and environment, or what Braudel called climate, set the parameters of culture, politics, and history in that ancient sea where bread, olives, and the vine had created a shared civilization. So that it tells you where history is going. Somebody in my generation has read history from that previous standpoint, that of colonial exploitation and so forth. And so it was through his book on slavery in Brazil that initially led me to this. Now, I have not read a lot of books of this sort. Daniel Defoe has a really nice book titled The Storm. It's not as riveting as his book about the plague, but it is possibly the first book in world literature that takes on a storm. What is the right word? That takes on climatology as an important subject of study and history in itself. So I wanted to share that with you, but now we're going to go in a little different direction. Prompt number 2. Which book gave you a wake-up call, climate or otherwise? Well, as far as my wake-up call, I don't think there was a book. It was largely through a friend on Facebook that I first gradually had a wake-up call. So my wake-up call has not been, it was not a sudden thing. It was a gradual accretion, and it was not from books or that sort of thing. Of course, I had seen the Al Gore movie when it came out long ago, and that should have woken me up or awakened me, but it didn't, and it really took the daily engagement with this friend on Facebook to do so. His name, incidentally, is Ian Millis, and he is an artist in Australia. But so, wake-up call in a different sense, I would say, is this book, the book about the assassination of Fred Hampton. Now, it is a murder committed by Chicago police officers under the direction of the FBI. I believe it happened in 1969. I could be wrong on that. It's been a long time since I read this, so the details are not crystalline in my memory. This is the new edition, I think just out in 2019. I read the first edition, and it really sounded a clarion call about the problem of race relations in the United States of America. I grew up in a time where all such things were off the map, so to speak. There was no cartography of race relations in the era in which I grew up, or to the extent that there were, they were silently shuffled out of view. I recently read, I think, Disinherited, a book about the process whereby Native Americans were ejected from their homelands west as the white settlers came in. And that book was published, I think, in the decade of my birth, but of course I would have had no access. And so I grew up in a sort of insulated enclave of white suburbia, and none of these ideas were allowed to penetrate. In fact, I've often credited a play that I wrote in 2004, so we're talking just 20 years ago, to be my first wake up as far as the matter of colonialism at all. I had never given a thought to it, except peripherally. So this is a story which hits real close to home, and you realize, I mean, of course, nowadays with the internet, people growing up after me have access and easy access to a wealth of information. The means of burying relevant information have not been perfected as yet. So there is more opportunity for a young un now to learn about colonialism, to learn about racial exploitation in the United States. So this was a wake-up call when I read it. The realization, of course, we were always taught officer-friendly is a friendly help when you're in need. The reality has proven to be much more complicated than that. The officers that killed Fred and Mark Smith, I believe was the other man's name, never saw justice. They were never brought to justice. So these things are perpetuated. I believe such murders, if they occur now, occur even earlier in the process. I would suppose that people that appear to be threats to the established order, as in say, climate scientists down in Latin America. They are picked off earlier, before the threat develops. So I had a thought that was going to follow on that, and I don't remember what it was. There is a lot of other information out about Fred Hampton and other situations. I have not delved in nearly as much as I ought. And I picked this up at one point. I wanted to do a play about this, and one of the difficult aspects there is that I am not capable of doing, say, the Fred Hampton story, that sort of play. What I might be able to do, or might have been able to do, would have been a story about the actions of the white operatives. And then, unfortunately, the information is just not there. This is the only real book that exists, and I have my qualms with it as far as a history, but it is groundbreaking. It is the first step, and a lot more needs to be done. I recently read the latest book about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and that is a field where years ago it was hard to find details, and more has come out, and more keeps coming out. And I really wish a host of historians would get on this story and just get behind the scenes and dig up everything. I believe the building in which it happened became such a threat that it was demolished, and I don't know any of the details behind that. The story is quite interesting, what happened after these two young men were murdered in their sleep, I believe. So, number 3, your favorite book cover that features nature. Well, here's the trouble. I was looking and looking and could not find a book cover that features nature. I know I've seen Penguin editions that have nature, but usually there's some kind of like rustic cottage with a, jovial looking person with some kind of straw hat, and then there's like a hill behind them. And I don't know that this cover really qualifies as a natural scene either. And an interesting thing, though, as I was looking through all of my books and not finding a single one with a cover that had to do with nature, I began to notice a trend, which was that books that have some relation to Africa tend to get a little picture of some nature. And these were the only books that I found. And you can see this is J.M. Coetzee, who is a South African writer, white. And this is a book that was recommended to me by a viewer of my channel, and I have not gotten to it yet. But I think that perhaps, almost invariably, all of the books in my collection have a cover illustration that has to do with something cultural. It might be books, it might be paintings, but nothing with just nature. I mean, if you go to an art museum, there is nothing more boring than landscape painting. You want to see figure painting and that sort of thing. And so that may be the problem, but it's also is, I think, a way of suggesting, well, there's no culture in Africa to speak of. That, of course, is not true, but this is what winds up on the covers. I just found it curious. Number 4, a book that discusses revolution and change. And here again, I mean, I might point out this, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, by Walter Rodney. This was a good book, and I enjoyed it, but I believe I read to page 214 and then somehow got distracted and never finished it. I really must make amends as far as that. But more I wanted to talk about Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He has a whole slew of essay collections. I brought down two of them, Decolonizing the Mind, which I think you can see just by virtue of the title, discusses revolution and change. But I thought I would read a little bit from this one, Moving the Center. And moving the center is, or could be, a way of saying something very close to that. I think as we are in a period of profound global change, climatologically speaking, no less than anything else, that we as human beings, if we are to persist, we have to seriously consider moving our center. So I would like to just read a little bit from this. And so this, it's all very interesting, I think. I have not read him for 20 years now. And I have to get some of his newest collections. He's a marvelous writer. I was never as big a fan of his novels as this, but I think they probably deserve revisiting as well. So, among the Agikuyu of Kenya, and he incidentally writes his books in Gikuyu, and then they get translated into English. Among the Agikuyu of Kenya, there used to be a Gikuyu poetry festival, or shall I say competition, which drew large crowds. The best poets of the various regions would meet in the arena like in a battle and compete with words and instant compositions. These poets had even developed a form of hieroglyphics, which they kept to themselves. This kind of festival was killed by the British, for they did not want crowds of people meeting and practicing things that they, in the colonial administration, could not understand. The importance of the oral tradition is that through its agency, African languages in their most magical form have been kept alive. One of the highest developments of this was the griot tradition in West Africa. Whole epics and histories of families and nations were banked in the memories of these keepers of the word. Now we get into the long paragraph that I really wanted to segue into. The second tradition is that of Africans writing in European languages, particularly in those of the former colonizers. This is clearly a product of the fatal encounter between Africa and Europe in two ways. First is the question of language choice, and this links it inevitably to the literatures carried by European languages. This literature is branded with the Europeanness of the word, a case of black skins in white linguistic masks. Secondly, it arose out of and was generally inspired by the great anti-colonial resistance of the African masses. Much of the literature was initially often a reaction to the conception of the universe in European literature, in which the African was depicted as the negation of history. It had done a remarkable job in redrawing the images of the world as previously drawn by the literature of Europe. It has rescued the world defined by European languages from the total grip of Eurocentrism. But in another sense, it continued and even aided in that Eurocentrism by its very choice of languages. In other words, it does not really matter how much Caliban is able to curse in European languages. He can do very remarkable things with it, as we can see in The Tempest, in that great poetic evocation of Caliban's love of the island and his total identification with its landscape. But insofar as he has not been forced to abandon his language, as happened in the case of the African diaspora, he is accepting Prospero's racist assumptions about the universe and contributing to Prospero's linguistic universe. He accepts that only by adopting the European tongue can he manage to express his humanity adequately. He has colluded in Prospero's uprooting of the African tongue a la Coetzee, referring to that other author. I don't really know how you say his name, Coetzee. So he has colluded in Prospero's uprooting of the African tongue a la Coetzee. The African peasant and worker in this literature reappears on the stage of world history, speaking not his gabble, but perfect English, French, or Portuguese, a remarkable case of literary surgery and transplant, since in reality, the masses of African people do continue speaking and using and creating in African languages. Note that the new Caliban comes to Prospero's linguistic high table with an offering, a linguistic bottle of wine, so to speak. Thus, this tradition has tried to forge an identity by borrowing very heavily from African languages, that is, from the rich harvest of orature as developed by African languages over the years. But note also that Caliban is not borrowing from Prospero to enrich his own gabble. On the contrary, he sees his role as that of borrowing from his own gabble to enlarge the possibilities of Prospero's languages. He gives nothing, absolutely nothing, back to his languages. This ultimately is the tragedy of the Europhone tradition, which has come to wear the mask of African literature. It is now a case of black skins in white masks, wearing black masks. Well, let's go on. In the area of economics and geography, it is the raw materials of gold, diamonds, coffee, tea, which are taken from Africa and processed in Europe and then resold to Africa, etc. I mean, that just goes with that thing I read in a video recently from Kwame Nkrumah, that the colonial relationship is one of extraction. I think there was something else in here that was kind of neat, but I don't know if I can find it. What was it? Oh yeah, this, just to delve a little bit into the colonial history here. When nations meet on terms of independence and equality, they tend to stress the need for communication in the language of the other. They choose the language of the other merely to ease communication in their dealings with one another. But when they meet as oppressor and oppressed, as for instance under imperialism, then their languages cannot experience a genuinely democratic encounter. The oppressor nation uses language as a means of entrenching itself in the oppressed nation. The weapon of language is added to that of the Bible and the sword in pursuit of what David Livingstone, in the case of 19th century imperialism, called Christianity plus 5%. Today, he would have probably described the same process as Christianity debt plus 40% in debt servicing. In such a situation, what is at stake is language as more than a simple means of communication. So I cannot recommend, if you're talking about the world change which needs to occur, I cannot recommend anybody more highly than Ngugi wa Thiong'o and his many books of essays. As I say, I have to make a point of grabbing his latest ones. I've heard some of them are very good. I think there's I think maybe one or two that I haven't read. So, number 5, do you read outside? If yes, where is your favorite spot to do so? And the answer to that is no. It's more just a question that I think Kim alluded to it a little bit. I don't like necessarily, I like to go hiking a lot in, say, national parks and that kind of things, but the idea of just sitting out in the backyard when it's buggy season, and here in Chicago, we don't have very good weather often. It's either too hot or too cold. And oftentimes, you know, within the same 24-hour period. If I were living in Los Angeles or something like that, I would love to be sitting outside and reading all the time. My father used to sit out all the time, and I noticed that people who sit out all the time seem to have a longevity. I suspect that I will be missing out on that. Number 6, your favorite Indigenous author or book. And here, the sad truth is I've read so little Indigenous writing. Last year, I read The Night of the Living Res by, I think it's Morgan Talty, and loved that book and have said I have to do more of this. I have somewhere on my shelves a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which a lot of people have spoken highly of, and that is on my goal for this year. I want to read that book, but I have to find it first. Now, in the course of pulling out books for these, I managed to find a whole bunch of my books on slavery that I didn't know where they were. So that's kind of cool, but I have not found Braiding Sweetgrass as yet. So I can only answer in a very limited way because, you know, and Brian at Bookish has commented somewhere that he's a little bit leery about reading mammoth novels. And I can see, now that I'm reading Les Mis by Victor Hugo, a lot of reason for that. I mean, it's a big, I don't know, 1,300-page work of European, Eurocentric concerns and opportunity cost. There's no way I can read something else when I'm delving into that. So I'm still going to try to finish it, but I have, just pulling out books here and there, I realize I have diverse reading goals, and if I don't get my speed jacked up a bit, then I have to choose more wisely than something like Les Miserables. But let me not talk about that. I am hoping that I get to a point where I enjoy it, and a big mammoth is a good means to bolster one's own reading stamina. Number 7, a book that takes place outside or features nature as a character. I will show you this. This is one of those books I would like to get to. I am sure that I have heard about this on Steve Donahue's channel. I believe he himself has been known to do such things as sail alone, but I have not gotten to it yet. Of course, travel on the oceans, I mean, recreation is very nice, but I'm bringing it into the next thing because there is number 8. What book genres do you associate with each of the 4 elements: air, earth, fire, and water? Well, I started with water because water I associate with travel. Now, most of my travel has been done overland in a car or in the air in an airplane, but still, travel and water go together well back into antiquity and pre-antiquity. Going on an ocean voyage meant something. And so, but I realize travel over the oceans has often led to conquering. This book actually, they were shipwrecked and then they wound up traveling overland. And then you've got Christopher Columbus, a noted explorer, I really should take those price tags off, but I like the fact that it cost me $1. I had it in a mass market paperback and read this so long ago. And I don't know if anything, I read him and Marco Polo. I don't know if anything will compel me to go back when there are many others that I need to read, such as Bernal Diaz. And then, of course, you have the travel that was involuntary. And then you can talk about involuntary travel on the macro scale. I have all kinds of books about slavery, and this one, I remember liking it very much, but I don't remember an awful lot about it. Well, I don't need to extend this video any longer than it needs to be. We're already. So that was water. Air, I decided philosophy. What is philosophy but air? Hot air sometimes. And I also might add, this could also qualify as a book that takes place entirely out of doors. It does not necessarily have nature as one of its characters, but the Greeks were very much outdoorsy. So Earth, for Earth, I think of Native American studies. I'll just show you some. This one I picked up not long ago and have not read. And then the other ones that I show you, I have read. This one. This fits right in with where I am reading Henry Adams. I'm in the administration of Thomas Jefferson. I have another dedicated book to Jefferson's Indian policies that I have not read, and then I have this, which I think I might have liked this book best of those two. And then for something more local, dealing with Chicago, because of course we're talking about land. So that is why I associate Native American studies with land, because or earth, because the earth was theirs, so to speak. And I know that there are other things to be talked about and studied, but for me, coming from my perspective, this, as I say, is all stuff that was withheld the little child, if you will, or presented to us in a stilted manner. So, and then fire has to be the next one, and of course, fire I associate with war. Now, I normally don't make these associations, but this is for the sake of this tag. So, the poems of Wilfred Owen, to my mind, there's no one better. Of course, you're only going to get a handful of poems, 10 maybe. You're lucky if it's 10 with him that are really at the highest level. He's a figure similar to John Keats. But once you know Owen, a lot of the poems, even say the one on Maundy Thursday, are well worth your attention. And then there are plenty of anthologies. This is the Everyman's Library anthology. And the American Poets Project has poets of the Civil War, poets of World War II. World War I is the most anthologized period. And of course, you might easily put any war novel into the same category. And miraculously, I found these, and I've been looking for these for a while. They were tucked in a corner where I would not have expected them. So I generally associate fire and war. Of course, if you study ancient history, you've heard about Greek fire, and I'm not sure that anybody has really made any inroads into what the nature of that weapon was, Greek fire. So, number 9, we are all connected. Name a book that brought you community, and again, e.g. a book club, buddy read, etc., or made you think about community. And in January, I read War and Peace with a number of co-readers, and that really is the first time I've done that kind of a buddy read or a communal read, and it really has brought the idea of community into focus. Now, I am reading Les Miserables with a group, but I have fallen so far behind. Some members, I believe, have already finished the book, and I'm just barely crawling along. Number 10, have you ever participated in Climathon, or are you planning to? No, I have not. I have not heard of it, as Kim said in her video as well. So I have gone on long enough. Thank you, Kim, for tagging me. And if you, the viewer, have stuck through to this point, thank you very much for spending your time with me at this BookTube channel.